Welcome back. Last week, investment bank Renaissance Capital said South Africa may come alarmingly close to losing its place as the second biggest economy in Africa. Nigeria officially became Africa's biggest economy in April last year, leapfrogging South Africa. This after the government announced a long overdue rebasing of that country's gross domestic product. Meanwhile, Egypt, the continent's current number 3, is projected to reach $315 billion, just a couple of billion shy of overtaking South Africa. Well, with us this afternoon, Israel Mkhize. He's the resident Africa political economist at Bukindaba Consulting. Israel, thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Well, first of all, how important are these rankings? I mean, do they matter?
They matter very much because if you're looking at African countries, there's about 8 African countries who've recently done their rebasing of their GDP, which gives a comprehensive picture of the current state of the economy for the investor to boost foreign direct investment confidence, so to speak, and also to move the baseline, because most of them, let's say, take Nigeria, for instance, moving a baseline maybe from 1999 to 2003 and starting from 2003 up to 2013, so that then from that period they begin to measure the economic performance. In that rebasing process, they obviously have to look at how the economy has diversified, how much each industry is performing in terms of those that are coming up and those that are shrinking. Then it's obviously comprehensive because it's not just the internal financial aspect to look at it. Like you'd have, in the Nigerian case, bring in the African Investment Development Bank, you bring in the IMF to look at the rigorousness in terms of the acquisition of the information financial statistics.
Okay, fair enough. Where does the threat come now from Egypt? I would have thought the Arab Spring was just 5 years ago. There's a fair degree of instability in Egypt, even as we speak. Why are they such a big threat? Are we not on the progressive end here, or are they doing pretty well?
Well, I think it's because of the nature of our economy. And 2, what is important is the speed at which economic policy can be driven to spin the country out of depression or recession or bust. Because in Egypt, if you carefully look, just 4 or 5 years ago, there was turmoil with the successions from Mubarak to the Muslim Brotherhood. Now it's Sisi, and we're looking at Sisi's termination in terms of economic policy. Their GDP, as we've read from RenCap, that it has grown, say, from 4.6%, between 4.6% and 5.6% year in, year on, in the past 4 years, or 2 years, so to speak. But South African GDP has rather, like in the first quarter, projection was at 2%, but during the midterm speech budget of the minister, he had to debase it a bit to less than 1.5%. Look at the employment question, that we're sitting at 25.5%. Although we've got the, like between now and 2020, projection of 5% growth, which will try to reduce unemployment, say, about 14%. Egypt has already done it within this coming out of the turmoil, political turmoil, where they've tried to reduce unemployment by 12%.
I want to talk about that in a moment, but first let's just take a look at the dollar against emerging market currencies. Now, South Africa in recent months, they've been hit around 17%, the South African rand. Egypt, with this turmoil in emerging market currencies, only declining by 9%. All right, that's a big decline. But anyway, there's a vast difference between the two. Does that matter?
It matters a lot. Talks to the question of the stability of the currency, because it also shows how the sensitivity of the currency is and its dependency to foreign, for instance, the dollar, which we usually use to measure. But when you look at the economy in Egypt, there's been, in their currency, there's been more dependence on good internal demand. And in our case, we've got our economy and our currency dependent on, for instance, Chinese, which has been the biggest consumer of our commodities. Look at what happened to their currency. They ended up having to devalue their currency. As it was going down, it obviously affected the demand side of the economy on our commodities, which is the biggest part, say, of what brings our GDP on the table. So it does, and also investors are looking for some kind of stability on the currency, not much of inflation and so on. So as we have been waiting to hear the pronouncement, for instance, from the Fed, as the Reserve Bank announced the governor, to see how they play around with the question of interest rates, it obviously directly impacts on the flexibility and the fluctuation of our own currency. And yeah.
You speak about threats to investment, threats to the economy. Just very briefly, it doesn't help Egypt now to have that plane go down 2 weeks ago, because you have flights being held back in the UK, for example. Tourism, major input into this country's economy. So that's a threat on that front for Egypt, is it not?
Of course, geopolitical economy is the driving force right now of world economies. There's been a conversation in Europe where financial economists were asking whether is it politics or is it financial markets that are driving decision of investment. But they came to a conclusion that it's actually the geopolitical factors that are driving the question, because if there's issues of security, look at the results, the investigation around the plane crash. If it's deemed to be an accident, investors might say, okay, maybe natural occurrences happen, but if it is deemed as there's an attack, that would then obviously link the Egyptian socio-political and socio-geopolitical element to the question of what? Of extremists. And now who wants to go and invest where there are extremist sort of instabilities, terrorism, and so on and so forth. So those socio-political and sort of incidental events, they obviously have an impact. And also the question of tourism. Look at what happened in Tunisia. The gunmen opened fire at the beach. How did it impact its tourism percentage with the European country? It really declined at the point.
We're going to have to leave it there. Israel, thanks very much indeed for coming in. Israel Mkhize from Bukindaba Consulting. A pleasure having you.
Thank you.